Let's talk about medical ethics. I wonder how many of you this morning would be happy when your last breath comes to say that you'd had a good innings. And what is a good innings anyway these days? 75, 80? 100 years ago, most of us would have lived to about 50. A bit harsh. Government plans would veer spending away from older people towards the youngest, the fittest, maybe the middle-aged man who still has a bit of significant earning power. The fact is, the financial cake isn't set to get much bigger, and we're talking here about how it should be sliced. More money for those with a greater life expectation, or an NHS that really does look after you from the cradle to the grave. Joining me, economist John Simpson, former Health Board Chairman, and in our voice studio, the policy academic Professor Deirdre Heenan. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning.
John, you're shaking your head there from the word go.
Well, I think the important central feature of the question you've raised is whether the NHS can be expected to look after us from the cradle to the grave in the years to come. I would wish that were true. Don't get me wrong in the discussion, I would wish that were true. But my own analysis looking at this says it's no longer going to be possible because as a community we simply can't keep resources going at the level at which, as a population, we began to expect it. You talk about the fact that the people are living longer. Yes, most of us will be able to say when we get to our retirement age that we've probably lived 10 or 12 years longer than our parents, on average. We're going to be about longer. But also, the world around us is better able to look after us. In fact, hip replacements, eye replacements, personal body part replacements, the issue of being able to be kept mobile when otherwise I would be sitting in my Zimmer. All of these things are now possible and increasing the demands, the sense of need for what the health service might do for us. If the health service is to be free at the point of need, we're now at a position where we're going to have to say, what do you mean by need? Because it's not need to the sense of something could be done. Must be something less than that.
I might draw both of you actually on your preferred body part replacement if and when the time comes. Deirdre, good morning to you too.
Good morning.
This one has politics all over. Clearly there's a ministerial slight here towards, where I was taking us in our opening comments there. But the chairman of NICE making the point very clearly, this is going to present some very interesting decisions. To be fair to the elderly, must we be unfair to the young? Can I put it like that?
No, not at all. I mean, I think quite rightly there's disbelief at this suggestion, but we have to be clear, and as John has said, the NHS has finite resources and it's under unprecedented pressures due to many factors such as an increasing ageing population, increasing expectations and, as you've described, technological advances. But we already make hard choices about where to apportion resources within the health service, which patients are given priority, when you get funding and treatments and when they're limited. And the National Institute of Healthcare Excellence has been asked by the government to review how it assesses the cost effectiveness of drugs. So under the current system, they take account of the cost of medication and the life-enhancing properties. But the Department of Health is suggesting they should take account of this new idea, which is the wider social benefit, which, as you rightly said, is saying, well, basically, it's a measure of the impact the treatment will have on the extent to which people living with this illness will produce or consume resources. And clearly, as you've already pointed out, people are at their most productive in paid and indeed unpaid labour when they're young. So this will disadvantage older people, unemployed people, disabled people and women. And we have to ask ourselves, would a crude economic measure of wider societal benefit be acceptable to us? Because it also ignores the contribution that people have made over the decades. And by virtue of illness, I would say, some people will always receive more than they give back. The United Kingdom has some of the worst cancer survival rates in the EU, cancers associated with ageing, so that would compound the issue. But I think on a wider ethical debate, we would have to say, does this sit with the principles of the NHS, the principles of saying that healthcare is free at the point of delivery? Of course, there are going to be issues about demand and need, as John has rightly pointed out. But I think this may open a wider debate to say, we cannot sustain the model of the NHS that we have. The demand is just not sustainable. But we need to move to say that we also have to begin to act more responsibly in terms of our own healthcare, manage our own healthcare, take account of our health, education, our priorities, for example.
Deirdre, that's the point at which I think the debate gets serious. You're very right to say individuals have to take more responsibility. But in fact, the way we're moving as a society, the individual responsibility and family responsibility is something that's reducing. The one generation looking after the next generation, grandparents looking after their offspring, then with the grandchildren, that family structure, the nuclear family, as we call it, is now diminishing its impact. There are many more people living, elderly people, maybe living as a couple or living on their own, who don't have close family relatives nearby, and they expect, and that's the key word, they expect the health service or social services to look after them. And the short answer to that is this is an unreasonable expectation, and we fudge the question. Deirdre, you said in terms of your argument, we are making these priorities. Yes, some of these priorities are being selected without any conscious, explicit set of decisions being made. Individuals looking after a particular hospital, a doctor or concern, is deciding what treatment to give patients.
Well,
actually, I think, John, you're entirely right in what you're saying, and that's why I'm saying what we need here is a transparent, open debate about rationing within the National Health Service. Rationing already exists,
yes,
but what we don't want to move is to rationing by stealth. So these decisions are made and you've no idea what they're based on.
But they've probably always been made, Deirdre, over the years. Health managers and administrators have probably always made this. It's just these days maybe we're more aware of it on the front page of the Times, for example.
Well, as I say, they would normally make them on issues around cost. So you'll remember stories, and there'll be stories across the press where individuals will campaign to get access to medicines in the NHS, but the National Institute would argue that they're too expensive. So there will always be that cost imperative of the actual medicine. But this is something very, very different. This is looking at the individual's benefit to wider society. So clearly, if you look at it in economic terms, which is what they're suggesting, then some people earn more and give more into government. But really, it sounds like something out of an Orwell novel if you start to go down that very slippery slope of saying, you know, you've had a good innings, after 70 we're not interested in you, or if you cannot contribute economically then we don't want to know about you.
Well, listening to you both,
dreadful.
Listening to you both this morning is the Commissioner for Older People, Claire Keatinge. Claire, good morning to you.
Good morning, Mark.
Deal with John's point there about, look, we don't like the feel of this, the look of this, you know, that Granny doesn't get the medicine she deserves or needs, but his point is that if we don't deal with it, we're fudging it by way of the monetarism that's at the heart of it.
And I don't think we are fudging it. I think we have to remember that older people are individuals in our society with the same rights to be treated fairly, equally, and with medical and health and social care treatments that will benefit them. They have the same rights as everybody else and must continue to do that. Nobody in our society is only the sum total of the work that they've done for money or the service that they offer society, whether that's now or going forward. People are individuals. And it's not about how old or young you are when you get any kind of illness or you need any kind of treatment. Really what's important is whether you'll benefit from the treatment. That's what makes us a civilised country. That's what makes the National Health Service something of which we can be proud and of which people can have confidence. So that whether we are at work, whether we are retired, whether we are volunteering, whether we're caring for other people, whatever we're doing in our life, we can be confident that the health and social care treatment that we need will be there for us.
John,
at the very best quality, right through to our last breath.
Claire, let me pick up the distinction that's lurking in what Deirdre and you have put into the argument, and hope I have as well. The difference between whether people at an elderly age are worth the spending. That's not an argument that I would join. But I do have to say we need to assess treatment as to whether it adds to the quality of the life of the people concerned.
But that's what we do currently. I think.
Well, we try to.
Well, I think that's what NICE would say they do. But I think what this is raising questions about how we value human beings. And if it is simply on financial terms, then the sanctity of life is destroyed, in fact, and we're on a slippery slope. Because access to drugs should be based on healthcare and quality of life assessments, not hard-nosed economic imperatives.
But Deirdre, would you add the phrase access to drugs regardless of cost?
No, I wouldn't, because they're not. Already we don't have access to drugs regardless of cost.
That's important.
NICE already make decisions to say, no, this must be rationed because it's too expensive.
Judith in Belfast.
Deirdre,
let me stop you. Judith in Belfast texts to say there is ageism at large here. Can we please use the term older people elderly is negative. Older people contribute, carers contribute at least 4 billion to the economy. But deal with this, for many people, I think to all three of you just finally maybe, the classic scenario, you walk with your baby in arms, and that baby in arms needs medicine to see it through, or it needs expenditure from that health trust or that administrator to get them through. And the choice is, well, is it for that person or for the very elderly person who's maybe slipping in and out of dotage? And people go, well, it's a hard choice. It's a hard choice here, Deirdre Heenan. Do I go left or do I go right?
The unseen set of decisions being made at the moment are actually in terms of people who are in the later stages of life, when we try to look after people to the point where we may have to provide hospital care, residential care, nursing home care. At the moment, we have no clear formula which says how much of that should fall on the state, how much should fall on the family, and how much should fall on the individual. And we are moving towards a formula which says once you've spent so many £1,000 on yourself or your family, then the state will take over the rest.
Okay.
We haven't had that debate.
I think the debate here is actually about this whole new concept, and the methodology is extremely suspect and something that would cause great unease in the policy community. And quite rightly, in my belief, NICE have rejected the proposal to consider wider societal benefits when making decisions and guidelines about policy around who gets what and why. It is impossible to quantify the value of an individual in an economic sense. Remember that many older people provide informal care for families to allow them into the paid workplace. And many older people are a very valued part of their wider family circle. And as I already said, they may have worked decades previously. So I think we need to have the discussion about healthcare, about how we produce a system that responds to need and not demand.
Okay.
And that we start changing behaviours.
Claire Keatinge, like it or not, the government is going here.
No, we are an affluent society, we are a civilised society, and we must treat everybody with the health and social care that they need, that is the best for them, for their quality of life and their lives themselves. And we must continue to do that. And this really flags up for me the need for anti-age discrimination legislation here in Northern Ireland. If there is a risk that older people are going to be discriminated against on the grounds of their age in health and social care treatment.
They are, Claire.
Somehow deemed that they're not worthy of the same treatment as somebody else, then we need to challenge that, because what makes us a respectful and civilised society is in part the way we treat the most vulnerable older people.
It's a fascinating debate. I wonder, can I put all three of you finally on the spot? John, if it was the choice, I think it's all right to look at these things figuratively until you see an older person. And I've never seen an older person who wasn't fighting for their last breath and proud to fight for it. But if in the position it's your health as an older person versus the life or the well-being of another or a younger, these are difficult things.
You could pose that question in terms where you would put me in the position where I would have to say the person whose quality of life and continuing quality of life was likely to be more important for them. It might be more important than mine as being someone who's at the upper end. I would have to say where the choices come, they will be very uncomfortable. There are uncomfortable choices in terms of how much to prolong life.
You might change your mind, John, when it's you that the decision is being made about.
Well, I'm beginning to think I'm getting closer to it, you see. So I'm trying to put this already in a personal perspective.
Deirdre, final word.
Well, I think we must remember the principle of the National Health Service, and the principle of the National Health Service was equity for all, regardless of age, background, income, etc.
But not regardless of the budget.
No, we want to keep that principle, but as I've already said, John, the budget already comes into calculations. What is being suggested here is something entirely different. It's not just about the cost of medication, it's about the wider societal benefits. In other words, what have you given to society? That would clearly disadvantage disabled people, older people, unemployed people and women.
I must leave it there. Thank you all for joining us. And Claire, thank you for joining us belatedly this morning. The Commissioner for Older People, Claire Keatinge. And our foil studio there, the policy academic with the University of Ulster, Professor Deirdre Heenan. And sat opposite me, the economist, John Simpson.